Here, situated.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome again to another episode of Heavy Live with Scoop B, available on all platforms. We are live via Periscope, Heavy.com's Philadelphia Eagles page, Giants page, and more. Make sure that you all subscribe on all those platforms. And right now, I'm elated because we have a guy that I've known for a few years. Giants linebacker, a legend. I believe you played for the Cleveland Browns as well. But
I did.
Most people know you as a New York Giant guy. It's none other than Carl Banks. Carl, welcome to Heavy Live with Scoop B.
Scoop, thanks for having me, man. This is an honor.
Yes, sir. We did something with Scoopy Radio a couple years ago. And
I remember.
It was via phone, but to do this video thing, it's pretty cool, man. I know you're a busy guy. The Giants did not take care of business last night against the Pittsburgh Steelers. What happened?
Well, listen, I'm a big boxing guy, and sometimes you're punching above your weight class, and they're not quite ready for the level at this stage of the season, for the level of what the Pittsburgh Steelers brought to the game. I mean, you could see some really good stuff happening. They couldn't run the football. They played decent defense. They played good at times and then decent at others. And then, that championship pedigree of the Pittsburgh Steelers started to come up with different things to exploit the Giants, and they just weren't quite ready for it. So, if you're a Giant fan, you saw a lot of things that will give you some hope, like the way Blake Martinez was a tackling machine. We had gotten so conditioned to watching Giants middle linebackers just be able to read a play and get close to one. Martinez, dude, he made about the first 5 or 6 tackles of the game. So you're excited about that. Leonard Williams was disruptive. He gave Marquise Pouncey all he could handle, man. There were times he had Pouncey on roller skates, and then he got the most treasured of all things that his critics say he could never do. He got a sack in the game. So, listen, there are some positives that they didn't have last year. I think their scheme is so much better, both sides of the ball, than the one last year. So, and the players are playing hard, man. So we'll see. The offensive line has got some work to do, man, because Saquon Barkley is just too good to not be able to get any yards rushing the football. So it's a new offensive line, a lot of moving parts. It's going to be, I think, another 3 weeks before we really know what this Giant offense is. Right now, the offensive line, that is, right now they're trying to figure it out themselves, and I think we'll find out what they are in a couple of weeks once they start to get a little cohesion.
26-16 was the final score. Steelers and Giants. And just taking a cursory look at the box score. Daniel Jones, 26 for 41, 279 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 INTs. Jones also carried the ball 4 times, 22 yards. He ran more than Saquon Barkley ran, and this won't be a thing that happens in the future. This is not Willie Beeman we're talking about. We got to talk about Daniel Jones, and I think in this situation, it seems like an isolated incident. If you're the Giants, you say what about Saquon in Game 1?
You say you chalk it up to the game, basically, because the Pittsburgh Steelers were better up front. The Giants could not get them blocked, and you say to Saquon, we're going to get him next week. I think the offensive line will show some sense of pride and say, listen, we cannot allow anybody to shut our franchise running back out. And he's just too good to be shut out. So thankfully, they won't be playing the Chicago Bears for the next 15 games. I mean, not Chicago Bears, the Pittsburgh Steelers for the next 15 games. They got the Bears this week, and they should fare a little better.
What stood out to you about Ben Roethlisberger? Did it feel like a Ben Roethlisberger classic game?
Yo, let me tell you. Yeah, to answer your question, short answer is yes. Once he got it going, the answer is yes. But, you know, with athletes, we're so accustomed to seeing the comeback videos in the offseason, post-surgery. There's always a guy rehabbing you. We didn't see any of that from Ben. And then as camp started, we didn't hear anything about Ben. But, Scoop, when I tell you, watching him in pregame warmups, the ball was coming out so hot. I'm like, dude, he don't even look like he had surgery. And you could see he was rusty early in the game, but once he got it going, man, he was zipping the ball all over the place. He looked like vintage Ben.
You know why we didn't see Ben Roethlisberger? I don't know about you, but he blocked all media members on Twitter. Did you?
That's right. That's right. I remember that.
Did you get blocked?
I didn't get blocked because I don't even follow him.
Brian Mazik just checked in for those heavy contributor to heavy on Patriots, heavy on Bulls, and everything else based in Chicago. Welcome in, teammate. What's going on, Brian?
I appreciate you. Thanks a lot for having me. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Banks.
Brian, it's Carl, man. Pleased to meet you too.
Yeah, I say that out to everybody. If I go to McDonald's, it could be an 18-year-old at the cash register. I still say
all right.
But I will call you Carl. I always, definitely take the preference.
When you talk about Banks, Carl, your last name is Banks. You may get a kick out of this. Did you hear that Will Smith is putting the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air house in Brentwood, California on Airbnb?
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
And the only way you can stay is if you're a California resident and they're checking. So if you have to be like related to the people who are staying or connected in some way. It's like the bubble.
Wow.
You have paperwork and make sure you're straight. You didn't hear about that?
I did not. No. Wow. That's interesting. I knew he was rebooting the movie.
Yeah.
But I didn't hear about the Bel Air mansion being for Airbnb.
I went to the
That's
beach.
dope.
I went to the beach for a few days, and I was on the beach reading on I don't read TMZ much, but I happened to see it when it said Fresh Prince and TMZ. I said, "What's going on here?"
Wow.
Yeah, man, that to me, that's crazy.
No, it is.
Yeah, it's always good to see people expanding and building upon the little seeds that they planted. What I mean, long times ago. I'm one of the main reasons that I'm here, Carl, is that I grew up on that mid 80s, late 80s football, and I cover the Patriots right now. So I was born and raised in Chicago. So when you guys came along, the defense in 86 against that was always compared to the Bears defense the year before. And so I remember having spirited debates about, was the 85 Bears defense better than the 86 Giants defense? So I have to, since I have you here, ask you that question. How often do you get that?
That debate, man, it goes on. And the thing about it is I'm major Wilbur Marshall and Otis Wilson fan.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And the answer to the question is we were both really good. So I take the Bears, I take our team in 86, and I'll take that Ray Lewis Raven team. And you can rank them however you want them. You're not going to come out a loser, So right. I think there are three all-time defenses. And, I grew up Steel Curtain, Purple People Eaters. But I take our defense and put it in any era, and we dominate. I'd take the Bears 85 defense, put it in any era, they would dominate. And I would take that Ravens Ray Lewis championship defense, put it in any era, and they will dominate.
Do you see any similarities to what's going on right now with the Patriots defense, which was number one last year, had a good showing in week one? Obviously, Bill Belichick was your defensive coordinator with the Giants, head coach with Cleveland Browns. Do you see any parallels there? And if so, like which players are you looking at? Like, oh, wow, he's having some of the same responsibilities that I had, some of the same responsibilities that Harry Carson had, and so forth.
Well, I think more so than looking at the players and seeing similarities, it's the scheme, the scheme similarities. what is required of each player. Like their two gap defense, their outside linebackers are required to set the edge. That's an integral to the success of that defense. You can't let anybody run outside. You funnel everything back inside. But it's hard to say what, aside from the schematics, it's hard to compare players, because the one thing Bill has been known for is giving his players the things that they do well. So we never had a cornerback like the Patriots have, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we could not play the type of man coverage that Stephon can play. Mm-hmm. We had Mark Collins. He was a little different. Mark could play man, he could play zone, he was not a Stephon Gilmore, but he tailors his defenses to his personnel. So I can tell you they're still teaching off of our films from the Giants. Bill still has film clips of how techniques are played, mm-hmm. and he still teaches off of that, off of some of our film. But those players tailor it to what they do best.
Absolutely. That's the best way to coach. I mean, obviously, I feel like that's always the best head coaches that don't literally try to force the same scheme on every set of personnel.
Dude, I can tell you, Brian, there's so many coaches in the NFL right now that do that. It's unbelievable for them to ignore what their talent base is and then just start installing plays and not teaching, not understanding the capacity or the capabilities of their personnel. And it's embarrassing, because some of these guys have these names for themselves, and then you find out, oh, they just had great personnel at their last job. They can't coach worth a damn, because they can't get good players to play, because you don't want to change your defense to fit the personnel, or at least teach the personnel how to play your defense.
Can you give an example of like most recent time that you've seen that? And is it on both sides of the ball?
Oh yeah, but it's a lot easier on the offensive side of the ball, because the West Coast offense is it's generous in how it distributes the football. So it's not, once you get the quarterback on page, the routes are similar. It's so much stuff that's easy. But when you look at the Giants defensive coordinator from last year, he was in Arizona, and they had a great squad there, and Todd Bowles was one of his guys also on that staff. But James Betcher, I thought he was going to do some incredible stuff with the Giants, and what I found out in about 2 games is that they were fundamentally inept. They were ill prepared for every game. He just kept trying to put a square peg in a circle, and the players were just totally confused. And I'm not saying this to be personally disrespectful to the coach, because I think he's a good man. But professionally, I'm telling you, this is the stuff that just, if you're a football person, and I am, I grew up learning the game the right way. I had coaches that taught it, that taught proper fundamentals and told you why things are supposed to be the way they are. And then to spend time with the players and ask them just basic fundamental questions like, what were you guys doing there? I don't know. He just told me to go and do. Like, you can't coach at this level and be successful unless you've got all of these great players on your defense, where you just basically say, go out there and sick them, guys. But I just, it bothers me when I see these, and it's a lot of these, fancy name defensive coordinators, the new hot shots, and then all of a sudden you find out they can't coach worth a damn because they don't teach. To be a defensive coordinator, you got to be able to teach, and you got to have assistant coaches that are teachers. That's the one thing you will always find in a Bill Belichick system, is a team that won't beat themselves by doing stupid things or playing with poor fundamentals. They're not gonna, they will make you beat them. If you have more talent than them, you'll beat them. But if you don't count on a Bill Belichick team, either side of the ball, to make the mistakes that cost you football games, because they teach all the things that prevent that. They will not allow their guys to be careless, reckless with technique. They will teach it. They will drill it. And everything down to tackling, how you tackle, situational awareness, they do all of that. So that's what you got to do. You got to be a teacher if you're a defensive coach.
Yeah.
How much of that is millennials on the side of the football players, and how much of that is just there's a lot of I don't want to use the word fly by night, but there's just such an influx of talent on the coach's side that, you know, you're a hot name one day coming out of a coaching tree system. Do you think it's a 50-50?
Well, no, I don't. I think the hot name on the coaching side, you're only as good as your resume. But if you're a smart owner, you don't fall for the okie doke and say everybody's talking about him, so he must be good.
Yeah.
You get him in a room and you ask him, how do you plan to teach? What do you think of this? What do you think of that? If they can't answer those questions and they are used car salesmen, then they don't get the job. Millennials or who are baby boomers, it doesn't matter. They're football players. They want to learn. They want to be coached. If they've been, let's look at it this way. Look at the SEC, look at the Big Ten, and look at the coaches in those conferences. They coach their players hard. I've had Nick Saban as a college coach. I had him as a defensive coordinator when I was in Cleveland. There is nothing accommodating about Nick Saban when it comes to getting the details covered. He will insist on it. He will demand it, and he will coach you hard. So these young players, if they've come from big programs, they're used to be coached hard. They're used to being coached hard. But you got these coaches that want to try to be their friend and think that's the way to communicate with a millennial. No, you just can't make it personal. That's what millennials don't want. Don't personally insult them. You can coach them hard. You can curse them, but don't make it personal. Give them the reason why it should work. Because the one thing I do know is having a son that's a millennial, the big question is why?
Yeah.
You know, if you can tell them why, they'll do it. And they will laugh and they'll high five you and they'll be like, yo, you genius. Yeah. But if you're saying go do this because when I was younger, this is the way it was done, or so they're like, why? Why do I have to do that? You know, why do I need a house phone? Seriously, like, y'all had a house phone? Like, what do I need a house phone? If you say, well, you know, in case of an emergency and the cell lines are down, you always got this hard line. Oh, okay, makes sense. They gave me one free with my cable, so maybe I'll just keep it in the house. You know, so it's when coaching young players, your connection is not friendship with this guy. There's a delineation between coach and player. Your door can always be open, but your status as coach and as teacher has to remain that. Players will like you if you're teaching them and they're benefiting from that. If you tell them to do something and this is how it works, they're going to love you for it. But if you give them a bunch of nonsense or say, just do it because I said so, then yeah, they're going to rebel. They're going to be like, yo, later for this guy. You know, yeah, he lets us play our music loud, but we're not going to play hard for him, but we're going to party every practice. So, and then, you know, we are in this, in Scoop, I know you see this, it's more prevalent in the NBA, but it's getting more traction in the NFL, is the world of analytics, right? Mm-hmm. Analytics is not new to football. We used to call them tendencies. Analytics won us the 1990 Super Bowl 25 in Tampa against the Buffalo Bills.
Right.
Analytics is why we won that game, because if we'd have played our traditional defense, we'd have got run off the field like the Oakland Raiders the week before. But we looked at the percentages. They didn't run the ball. They had one running play, and it was a draw, and everything else was a swing pass to Thurman Thomas or passes down, crossing passes. Well, we looked at the percentages. That's what analytics are, right? But what we failed to realize And I think, and I don't know Daryl Morey, but he's been a inspiration for a lot of young analytics folks. You cannot take the human element out of a game that requires humans to play it. Analytics is a part of it, but if someone says it says to go for it on 4th and 2, no matter where you are on the field, if you could not get a 3rd down all game, chances are that 4th and 2 is not going to work. Right. No matter what the numbers say. See, because if your right tackle is bad and your center is bad and you're getting dominated all game, the numbers don't tell you that. The numbers say the percentages say wherever you are on the field, go for it on 4th and 2. Well, if you are up by whatever points or down by whatever points and you're backed up and you go for it on 4th and 2 and it costs you the game, and you can sit back and say, well, the analytics said this is what we're going to do. So the likelihood of us having success versus not having success is greater. Well, yeah, next year, because you're out of the playoffs this year. You know, it's the same thing with the Houston Rockets. You love the 3-pointer, right? And they say keep shooting them, they'll eventually fall. But then when the Lakers start to run you off the 3-point line and you can't even get your shot off and you're still trying to shoot it and they're giving you twos and you won't take it, that's why you're out of the playoffs. So, you know, the numbers are great, but people play the game. The numbers, the analytics are a complement to what you do well. If you don't do it well, don't do it. That's as simple as that. If you're 3/4 into a game and your 3 points are not falling and people are running and scoring off of yours, you can't shoot your way back in that. Not from the 3-point line.
I went to a small Division III school, and they were filled with guards and some forwards that ended up being centers. And, you know, the saying was, you live by the 3, you die by the 3. And that's D'Antoni basketball, if you're talking basketball.
Well, how many funerals has he had?
A lot.
Huh?
A lot.
Huh?
He walked off of this one before they could kill him.
Yeah. If you live by it and die by it, well, he's had a lot of funerals because every year it looks great until it doesn't.
Right.
You know, James Harden can't hit a shot, then guess what? He ain't the most deadliest guy on the court anymore, is he?
Nah, yeah. I mean, I think, you know, when you look at the Rockets at large, I think they're going to look back and say, man, maybe we should have kept Clint Capella. Should have traded for Chris Paul, because you saw Chris Paul raise his value. And it's the talk of the town. You know, there were about 7 teams who were interested in his services now. So, you know, you look at the Rockets, you always need a good point guard. You need a good center. And, you know, Harden can be a playmaker, but he's not a point guard.
Right.
With a scoring point guard, respect to him, but you have to put certain things around him to complement his playability.
Yeah, and you know the thing that we were just talking about, how coaches and players, that dynamic in the delineation. I think a bit of that. Now I'm not as close to it. I'm just an observer, but I'm a professional in this kind of stuff. Meaning professional player coach dynamics. It seems that the exit of Jimmy Butler from Philadelphia was one of those things that should not have happened. And Tobias Harris, who I love, right? But when you look at the energy that the Philadelphia 76ers play with, it's not the same that when Jimmy Butler's on there. And Butler's not for everybody. So I'm okay with them letting him go if he's not for them, because they got the personalities that they have in the locker room. But sometimes it's worth having a guy like that to get a personality, to get his act together, to play at a certain level. And I think when he left, they just kind of fell back into that comfort zone. I think Butler made everybody uncomfortable for a good reason.
Tell me something. Did you ever, past or present, see a comparison on the football field where there was a lack of Jimmy Butler in Philly? He went on to do better things. Would you say Deion Sanders leaving the 49ers may be similar, going to Dallas? Where do you see a similarity?
Well, Deion made everybody better, man. But I would say Charles Haley. Charles Haley, when he left the 49ers and went to the Cowboys, they got better, and the other team didn't.
Is there another? Jimmy Butler's known for having like this. It's a polarizing kind of effect. Like he's like you said, he makes people uncomfortable pretty much everywhere he's gone. So I'm born and raised in Chicago, so he started here, and he got to the point where him, Dwayne Wade, Rajon Rondo, mostly Dwayne Wade and Jimmy Butler, began to make all of the young players feel uncomfortable, and that precipitated the trade. He goes to Minnesota. He falls out with Karl Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins. He pushes his way out of there, goes to Philly, falls out of favor there. So is there another player that you can think of on the football field, maybe that you had personal dealings with because you were on that team, where you were like, you know what, this guy, it's an element about him that kind of irks people, but
I probably was that guy. Truth be told, but Eric Dickerson was a guy who was, obviously a great, but he was about his money, and if you weren't about his money, then he wasn't about you. So I don't know if that's a true comparison, but you normally get the guys who are the quote unquote jerks or to make people uncomfortable. They're either really good or really bad. See, Jimmy Butler's not for everybody, and everybody's not for Jimmy Butler. Because if you're Andrew Wiggins and you kind of go along to get along and turn it on and turn it off, and Butler's 100 miles an hour, win, lose, or draw, he gonna have a problem with you.
Absolutely.
I had a similar situation when I went to Washington. They drafted, I think the kid's name was Tom Carter out of Notre Dame.
Yeah.
I practiced at a different level.
DB,
Yeah, I practiced at a different level, and I know for a fact there are at least 10 occasions where I wanted to choke him out and literally got physical with him on a few because he didn't practice hard. He didn't care as much about it as I did. And for people that are high performance people, you want the same effort from everybody. And he was just different. He was odd. He went on to have a career. I think he finished in Chicago, I believe, but he just rubbed me the wrong way. I wasn't long for Washington anyway, but there's a standard, but it is a fine line. Getting to know your teammates, getting to know the culture of the team and what's allowed on the team. See, because Bill Parcells was a different kind of guy. He would, if you needed to get a guy in line, he'd get one of his best players to get a guy in line, or get 3 or 4. You need to get this guy going. He just don't seem like he care. And we could do whatever. It wasn't physical, but we would hold that kid accountable until he got on board. Or either that or we ran him out of town. So it's a different breed of athlete. But, for Jimmy, I don't fault him for wanting like-minded people in terms of effort. He found that in Spoelstra and in Pat Riley, because they teach that tough-minded basketball there. They're a mentally tough team. So he found that. And then he's like, they probably said to him, bro, come on in, do you, because we're doing the same thing.
Yeah, just like, it's funny because Jimmy is the kind of guy who there's no middle ground with Jimmy.
Right.
And it's like, there's even from a fan perspective, it appears there's no middle ground. People either love Jimmy Butler or they hate him.
He's an acquired.
It's weird how that is. I've always had this thought, and you tell me if you agree. To be the type of personality that Jimmy Butler is, and to be respected, you have to be great. So Mike, Kobe, both of those guys had a lot of that jerk in them, especially when dealing with their teammates. Jimmy seems to want to have the same thing, but do you think that his talent level justifies that attitude?
I think it does because he competes. See, he knows what he is as a basketball player. He never professed to be the greatest of anything in the NBA, but what he is very good at, he works at it and he's diligent. So, there's a different level of jerk that's acceptable. Obviously, when you are the greatest, like Kobe and Michael, everybody gets it. But, Kobe ain't for everybody. He was not for everybody either. Rest in peace. Nor was Michael. If you weren't, if Michael wasn't your type, you probably found yourself on another team more so than Michael finding himself another team, which is the difference between Jimmy Butler and those two guys, because they weren't going anywhere.
Exactly.
Butler could travel until he found his fit. And honestly, I thought when the move first happened, I'm like, is Butler running to the money? Like, is this a money grab or what? But then, you see the fit and you see the dynamic that he brought to the Miami Heat. There, he fits what they do. He fits their attitude, and he's a higher level than what they had in terms of player. So I just think it's a delicate balance. But if you've got a coach who's already practicing, those types of things, then you don't have a problem with it. And see, it's so interesting because you being in New England, all the noise you hear is from people that are not playing for New England.
It's like the Lakers.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? There's probably been 2-3 players since Belichick's been there that have said anything negative about him. Think about that.
Asante Samuel might be like the one that jumps out at the most.
Right.
He respects him, but he's the only one that seems like had the gumption to actually publicly be critical.
Right. Well, and just think about this. Malcolm Butler sat in the Super Bowl without explanation, right? Mm-hmm. He should say a word.
That's a word.
So when you have a program that's that demanding, those programs aren't for everybody. But when you're in them and you buy in, it turns out pretty good for you. And you don't hear a lot of people, I hated playing for Belichick. They might say he was a pain in the ass sometimes. He was very demanding, but nobody takes shots at him like he's a piece of garbage. You wouldn't hear a player say about Bill Belichick what I just said about James Betcher as a defensive coordinator.
Yeah. Speaking of that, I had a question, and I'm wondering this because there was a lot of speculation around this leading up to it. There was all this talk about how Cam Newton was not going to mesh with Bill Belichick. Mm-hmm. And it always strikes me how people swear that they know somebody that they've never met before. Mm-hmm. So people
exactly
just know Bill Belichick backwards and forwards because of all of these memes. What did you expect with that year?
So if you go back, and I don't know if you can search Twitter feeds, mm-hmm. but if you go back as early as February, mm-hmm. Whenever Cam got cut, right? Okay. I would say a week after that, I said Cam Newton would be a perfect fit for Bill Belichick. And then when nobody was taking him, right? Mm-hmm. I said, watch and see. It's on my Twitter feed. I said, mark my words, he will be a Patriots because his number just went down and Belichick will have him in at a number. They'll find a way to get him some money, which they will, mm-hmm. performance-wise or whatever. But he's going to work. He fits what they want to do. He gives them a different dynamic. It takes Belichick's offense in a whole nother dimension. And it worked out. So I didn't think that it would be a bad fit because Cam Newton's a hard worker. You're allowed to be a personality under Bill Belichick. You just can't be a bad citizen, but you can be a personality. He doesn't squash personalities. He don't want you doing Antonio Brown's nonsense and FaceTiming and all of that other nonsense for live from the locker room. But he has no problem with personality. But Tom Brady is, he's an institution. And I could see where people were kind of like, in a way, in their feels about, we don't know if we want him here. Well, you don't have a choice. You didn't have another quarterback. Mm-hmm. And he is the best one available amongst those that were available this year. So when they signed him, I'm like, oh, Josh McDaniels is going to love this, because he's going to give them so many different options that they never had before.
Yeah, and right now there's some rumors going around, and they just happened today. One of them is concerning a guy I know you're familiar with, Odell Beckham Jr. There was some rumors out there that he was available, and then there is also a rumor that Allen Robinson deleted all affiliation with the Chicago Bears off of his social media accounts today, because obviously he wants an extension. Right. So because the Patriots went into week 1 with only 4 active wide receivers. It's known that they need a playmaker there. Mm-hmm. What would be your thoughts on a potential deal if you could see that happening for either Allen Robinson or Odell Beckham Jr., and which one would you say you would think is the best fit in New England?
I think both guys could fit. I think what Odell will find out, that everything he says he wants, that there's a different level to achieving it in a Patriots uniform. He wants stability. He wants good coaching. Nobody will ever question Odell's commitment to excellence, but there's a different way you go about it in New England. It's not about you. And I don't think Odell, if he was in New England, he would be about team. He would be about team. But right now it's about him. He says all the right things. He does all the right things, but somehow it's get interpreted as he's all about himself. In New England, he will never, if he does the same things that he does today, he would be about their team and not the perception of he's about him. He would have a more positive attitude, a more positive outlook on football, and how much he loves football. He'll love it. He'll learn to love it even more in New England. I think just from a feasibility standpoint, he's probably cost prohibitive. He makes like $10-11 million a year. Mm-hmm. Robinson would probably be the guy, but if they took it to another level, Odell and Cam would be a great matchup. And then, you also look at the dynamic. You got a miserable Julian Edelman, happily miserable Julian Edelman, which, he's a team guy too. He sees if a guy can make them better, he'd welcome them with open arms too. But, those guys, they were such a close-knit group, him, Brady, and Gronk, and he's the last man there. He's going to do his job. He's going to do it well, but he understands now that the game changes and you just have to adapt. So if they were forced to bring, not forced, but if they were fortunate enough to bring either one of those wide receivers in, I think he would find a way to be okay with it, because Odell gives him more opportunities to catch more balls underneath, taking attention away from him.
Yeah. You talked about Odell, or rather you talked about Cam Newton, Carl, and you talked about the fact that just because he's a personality, that doesn't make him a bad guy. And Brian, you kind of touched on it, how people think that they know someone based off of their personality. I'm curious to know, where do you think Odell and Cam are similar in that personality part, and where they're different in the perception of people?
You can take that one, Brian. Yeah, just from an outsider standpoint, I'll let you go first, and then I would.
I honestly, and I'm gonna be real, because it's only us in this 3 boxes. I think the thing of obvious, a lot of it is that people don't realize that a lot of the perception comes from race. They look at these 2 black guys and they're flamboyant and they're outspoken, and it just, a lot of times, like, you listen to the things that Tom Brady says, there may not be a more confident athlete, borderline cocky, arrogant athlete in the entire sports world, but it sounds different when he says it. Mm-hmm. It looks different when he shows up and puffs out his chest and and stares down the coronavirus, and I'm still going to work out with no mask on no matter what in Florida. Like it, and it when he does it, it's like an act of heroism, or he's a tough guy, John Wayne kind of a thing. But when Odell Beckham or Cam Newton show this confidence, to some people it comes off in a way that is off-putting to them. And Cam knows this. He's talked about it. And he said he knows he carries that. Cam's a little more, and I'll say this, Cam's more mature than Odell. So he handles that reality better. But I think that it's very similar, honestly. And you just look at the feedback that you see, that I see, like writing articles literally for millions of people every month. And you see how they respond. You're talking about masses response. And I think that in a lot of ways, a lot of people see Cam and Odell similarly.
Yeah, and I think, Brian, what people will say to you is, oh, well, Tom has earned the right to do that. He's been to 9 Super Bowls, and he's won the majority of those, and those guys haven't done anything but individual accomplishments, this, that, and the other. But it's not their fault. These guys, Cam Newton has never had a number 1 wide receiver. His best receiver was his tight end for years.
Yeah.
He had compliments on the outside, but they weren't threats in a game. Odell, I think, I'm not happy that he's not a Giant, because I wanted him to be, but I understood to a degree why he's gone. But he's a guy who, my fear is that he'll never be happy, because there's no, and this is the maturity you talked about, Brian. There are no perfect scenarios. And what I think Odell has to come to terms with is that he can do everything he can to be the best player, the best teammate, the best in shape, and the best citizen. And it won't be enough because the other guys are not all like him, and that's what he's got to come to terms with, because if he tries to be too much of a leader, he's off-putting, right? If he goes into a shell, then there's something wrong with him. But he goes about his work in the off season. He's always in tip-top shape. He's a high-performance guy, but what happens is he comes in and not everybody thinks the same way. Not everybody plays the same way, and then they get into some games where if he has a mistake, it's all his fault, and then he has to wear that. And he's not as mature in terms of carrying things like Cam Newton. He wears his emotions on his sleeve, even if he says he doesn't. So he's got to find, in my opinion, a comfort zone and being able to accept only what he can contribute and do that at the level he's been doing it. But just know that it's not going to all fall in place. There's never going to be a perfect situation. So he's got to make the best of it. He's got to encourage his teams to get better, because on paper they look great everywhere he goes, but the end result is it's never as good as he expects it to be. He wants to be a champion, but the sacrifice to that sometimes is accepting that everybody's not going to want it as bad as you. You gotta find a different way to motivate those guys to get them to play on Sundays.
Yeah, go ahead.
Second part to that question. When I look at Cam Newton and I look at him in New England this year, it reminds me of a redemptiveness that Carmelo Anthony had with the Portland Trail Blazers this season. People wrote him off. He rated value playing alongside Damian Lillard, C.J. McCollum under head coach Terry Stotts. When you look at Cam and say he wins this year, say the Patriots win the Super Bowl, at least go further deep into the playoffs, do you think that shuts up a lot of people about him, one? And two, do you see a comparison between he and Carmelo Anthony?
I don't think it's ever going to shut. I mean, even at his best, people had an issue with Cam Newton. There are people that will always hope for the worst. They are hoping for him to fall off the performance cliff. So he'll prove those people wrong, and he'll feel great about it. Yeah, there's some comparison. I think to a large degree, these guys are misunderstood, and I think it's on purpose that no one, when it comes to Melo, people say he demanded the ball in his hand, and he says, well, there was nobody on the team good enough for me not to. Right? So if there was another player out there that could do something, I didn't have to have the ball in my hand. Nobody asked me to do it. Mm-hmm. The same with Cam. He's not a me first guy. He's a quarterback. He has to hand the ball off or give it to somebody else for him to have success as a quarterback. But if he wants to celebrate those things, he's about himself. Think about that. Mm-hmm. When he's been about his job is to get the ball to the people who can make him successful, but he's about him.
Yeah, it's something too, because you were talking about Odell Beckham, and I remember something that Troy Aikman said. Troy Aikman was talking about Michael Irvin, and they were asking him about the whole playmaker and his persona and how just flamboyant that Michael was. And Troy Aikman said something that really stuck with me. He said, "You have to understand something about wide receivers." He said they are these phenomenal athletes, in a lot of ways, maybe the best overall athletes in football, mm-hmm. because of just what they have to do. He said, but they have to depend on somebody else to get them to ball in order for them to show their greatness. He said, and you have to understand, for a lot of them, that is very frustrating. So they try to overcompensate for it in other ways. Do you mm-hmm. think that that's kind of the whole syndrome that Odell is in?
Yeah. To a degree, I think he's listen. When you have blonde hair, you're gonna get attention one way or the other, and you do it. For that reason. You know what I mean? Right. You don't dye your hair blonde to go hide in the corner. So, right. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if you call it overcompensating, but yeah, they do want attention one way or the other. But I just when they find that happy place, they're the best you could have as teammates. Yeah. When they don't, that's why they give them the name Diva. But my fear for Odell is that he's just so talented that there's not going to be a perfect match for him. I know he loves LA. If he went to the Rams, that may not even be a perfect fit. Even though on the outside it looks great, but he may not be their main target, even if he's there. And he may be okay with not being the main target, but is everybody else okay answering why he's not the main target? So the dynamics for him, yeah, he brings attention to himself. Obviously, like I said, he's got blonde hair, but I just think he wants it so bad that he's got to understand that there's no paradise. He's got to make the best of wherever he is and understand that there are things about him that people have to answer for that are unintended consequences of him not talking, him dropping a pass, or him just being him because he has blonde hair.
Let's take a reset for a second. Heavy Live with Scoopy here in the building with Brian Mazzee, contributor to Heavy.com, as well as two-time Super Bowl champion Carl Banks, played with the Washington Redskins, known now as the Washington Football Team.
You really went there?
Yeah.
I got 2 Super Bowl rings in New York, and you put that team on me?
Carl, tell me something.
You're wrong for that.
Yeah.
Listen, being a journalist, I got to be objective. I'm segueing into. I'm getting my Ernie Johnson on. I'm segueing.
Okay.
So when you look at the NFC East, the Giants lost. The Eagles and the Cowboys are in a good position, I guess, in the NFC East. But the Cowboys should have lost that game the other night against the Rams. I guess my question for you is, what did you make of that Sunday Night Football game?
Cowboys-Rams? I think when you look at the Cowboys, they look like a team with a new head coach. They're still trying to find their identity. They had some key injuries early on, and that's one of the things that you got to keep an eye on in this year's NFL. It may not be about talent alone. You're going to see some teams that are in contention late in the year because they're healthier than some of the teams that you expected to be there. But the Rams were trying to find trying to reestablish their identity, and Dallas just looked like, defensively, they're not the same team. They don't swarm the way they did. Their scheme is different now. And so they don't move sideline to sideline as much anymore. But I'll tell you, Smith is back. He looks great for a guy that hadn't played football in 5 years. But I'm talking about Alden. But the kid, Jalen Smith, he's not the same. That's the kid from Notre Dame, Jalen Smith, right?
Yes,
yeah. He's not the same active linebacker because he's not freed up to roam and run sideline to sideline. He's having to take on more blockers. Van Der Esch left the game. So that's going to hurt them. It's going to weaken them. So it's going to take a little bit for them to get going. I think offense will be better than their defense for a while. But they I think they should. They didn't make enough plays to win the game, in my opinion.
Philadelphia Eagles. We are broadcasting on the Eagles page as well as the Cowboys page through Heavy. What did you make of them in week one, and where do you see them moving forward throughout the season?
Boy, well, Philadelphia lost 3 offensive linemen. So if there's any coach that can win with less, it's Doug Peterson. I mean, he's impressed me each and every year. Now, they're starting to question him, and I'm hearing these rumors of a power struggle from one of the media members in Philadelphia. I didn't know that to be true, but he's a hell of a coach. I don't count them out at all because they were basically losing players in real time last year, and he was still finding a way to win. Like key players going out on one play, and he's coming back, getting first downs and finding ways to win. So I don't count Philadelphia out, even with their 3 offensive linemen. Now, like I said, it's a different year now. And obviously you got the wild card of COVID too, where guys would have to be quarantined if they were to contract that virus. So it's the dynamics are different, man. Health is going to be a big factor, more so this year than any other year in the NFL.
I was looking at, I wanted to kind of trail back a little bit to some kind of like Giants parallels. I was looking at, and this was on Thursday night football, and I'm not going to throw the name out here because I just want to see if you see any of the same things that I saw. Claude Edwards-Helaire had a fantastic debut. Now, the kid's only played 1 game in the NFL, but when I looked at his stature and the style in which that he ran, is there anybody that he reminded you of from years ago?
Ooh, I don't want to guess. No.
Okay.
Tell me who he reminds you of.
I was thinking Joe Morris because
I saw a little bit of that. Yeah, I saw a little bit of that
because I'm Joe Morris. When one of the things about him is that people I don't know where we got this thing where running backs needed to be 6'2".
Yeah,
I don't know where that came from.
Brandon Jacobs.
Or maybe it was Eric Dickerson because they're like 6'3", but or Eddie George. But the thing of it is that those smaller running backs with the low center of gravity, they are so hard to get a good hit on because the low man wins. But if this guy's already down there, and the thing of it is that they're hard to see too as well.
No, you're right. And if they've got good vision and good feet, you're seeing them too late.
Yes,
because they've gotten through a hole or something before you can even see him, and that was what Joe was really good at. And I actually do see a little bit of that.
Yeah.
I think he's faster than Joe, though.
Yeah. I was definitely going to say that because Joe wasn't that burst out speed like Edwards-Helaire, but I mean Joe Morris drove us crazy. Like as a Bears fan, you were like, cannot get a hand on that dude. Like and it seemed like he never went down on first contact.
No, that's that low center of gravity, and he had great balance too.
Yeah.
The third pick in the 1984 NFL draft out of Michigan State by way of Mount Morris Beecher High School. First of all, happy belated birthday, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Didn't know that you were a. Your sign is what? You are a
Virgo.
So your birthday is what day? I'm sorry, I should probably look that up.
August 29th.
Okay, because mine's September 8th. So mine.
Okay.
Yeah. Y'all Virgos.
And actually, Ben's birthday was like the day before yesterday. So.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know from your perspective a few more questions. We talked briefly about the Washington Redskins, so now the Washington football team.
Mm-hmm.
Your reaction when they decided to change the team name?
I'm okay with it. I just, it was time. If a race of people are part of humanity is upset because they find it offensive, I think you change it. Absolutely. I just didn't, when I played, we didn't give too much thought of the racial undertones or connotations of what that red-skinned Indian was. And nobody really brought it to the fore. So I think the awakening culturally in our society is a good thing, because the things that we accept, like, I'll give you another case in point. When I was a kid and the Dukes of Hazzard was on, and the general, what's his name, E. Lee, was the name of the car, and it had the Confederate flag on it.
Yeah,
I never thought twice about it until someone said, because I have family from the South, and they're like, you can't, cut that mess off. And I didn't know. Right. So, because they were just accepted norms. So, I mean, I guess the voices weren't loud enough, society-wise, to where we as players thought twice about it. And now that, again, the awakening culturally in our society is a good thing. We can't continue to do things that are offensive to humanity.
How did that affect your distribution with Starter when you guys were making product? I know I talked to people from 2K, and I remember when Kyrie Irving got traded from the Cavs to the with and he was on the cover with a Cavs jersey, and then that was an issue. Did that affect your production with Starter?
We actually had to cancel some production, but most of that product, and I can tell you, name changes are opportunities also. Absolutely. To get things in the market, and they're going to give you two opportunities, because right now they have the W, and they're going to, once they settle on a real logo, then that'll change again. But what we found is that the product that we were ready, willing, and able to just cancel and burn, retailers are like, no, send us the product anyway. And the reason being is because they're now collector's items. I mean, we live in this world of collectibles. I doubt if you see people wear them, but 5-10 years from now, they'll be up and they'll be going for a lot of money because there's an official name change, and they used to be called this, and people will have them as collectibles.
Do you think that Colin Kaepernick has a desire to play in the NFL again?
Wow, I was just having this conversation with my girlfriend because she's like, it's a damn shame he's not playing, and there's a part of me that says no. There's a part of me that says, you know what, if y'all want me, cool, let me think about it, but I'm not begging you to be on the football field anymore, because I think the window opened and closed again without any team giving consideration. And I think it would be, I just don't think mentally, and I don't know him, but just the fact that he's been left out and there's so many opportunities for him to come in and play, I just don't think he's all about playing anymore. I could be wrong though.
One thing, and it's because you said that you were having that conversation. I just had the same conversation with someone else, and one of the things that I said was, Colin Kaepernick to come back in the NFL and play it in this era right now during this time. The only thing that I could compare it to from a level of pressure would be Jackie Robinson.
Yeah.
It's the only thing I could compare it to, because every single everything that he does is going to be scrutinized to the umpteenth degree. And every single pass he throws, every single time he rolls out right, every single time he runs an RPO and decides to keep it, whatever it is, he's going to feel, because he's a human being, like he is carrying the hopes of all of his supporters on everything that he does.
You know what? I look at it a little bit different. I think he will be carrying, but he'll be carrying the weight of his movement.
Yes.
Because he's the one who literally opened the eyes of all the people that hated him, and they had to change their narratives. You know, when the commissioner said he was wrong, he should have listened. No, he knew what it was. Yeah. But it's almost like until the guy gets murdered on your front lawn, you just didn't see it. You don't think those things start to happen in America. But I think the commissioner knew what his point was, and his partner NFL teams knew what it was, but it was an economic decision because his network partners wanted to continue to show him kneeling so that it became a sticking point, a thing to talk about. And then, you know, you have a president who amplifies it, and it just became financially risky to have him continue to be a part of anything.
Carl, we're wrapping up now, but I'm curious to know, one more question from me. Is Eli Manning a first ballot Hall of Famer?
I don't know if he's first ballot. I think he will be in the Hall of Fame, though.
That's real.
I think his body of work is good enough. His Super Bowls certainly give him the nudge if it's close. And then if it's even that much closer, then he's got a name, Manning, that'll, break the tape for him.
And last question for me. Do you watch anyone today who plays your position? So, man, that reminds me of me.
Yeah, Von Miller, Khalil Mack, Bobby Wagner. Who else? I think that's it. And then I'm just a fan of the game, though. I look at him. If somebody jumps off the screen, I'm like, yo, I like this dude. But those are guys that I enjoy watching at the position, even though they don't play exactly the position I play. They play more of what Lawrence Taylor did than what I did. And I like my guy who's coming with the New York Giants. Keep this name in the back of your head, Lorenzo Carter. He's that guy. He will be the Giants' version of Chandler Jones, and he's probably a little more athletic. Now, I'm not comparing them because Chandler's got some success under his belt, but he could have the impact of a Chandler Jones in the Giants' defense.
Good stuff.
Enough said. Brother, thank you so much for joining us.
This was an honor, man. I really appreciate it. This was really cool.
For sure.
Brian.
I saw you on Pix 11 the other day promoting Starter from the office, man. It's doing a lot of good things. What do we have to expect moving forward?
Well, I got a lot going on, man. Starter is obviously my heritage brand and the one that we rock with. But I've done a deal with Tommy Hilfiger in NFL. We're launching that. Michael Strahan has a collection coming out, so we're launching that together. We have DKNY for ladies that we're launching. So we got a lot going on. I'm excited.
Has anybody from EA contacted you about being involved in Madden on MUT side, on the Ultimate Team side?
There's so many people that say that, and nobody has. And I'm on the all-decade team too from the '80s, and they have not. And I see people tagging them in tweets, and nobody's ever asked me to be a part of a MUT.
Yeah, we need to make that happen. We need to make that. I know some people.
All right. All right. Let's see what we can make happen then. I'd be happy to be on there.
Brian, thank you.
Thank you. Brian, it's a pleasure, man.
Yes, sir. It was a pleasure meeting you.
All right, y'all. I'll talk
Indeed.
soon.
Peace.
We're out.